In geopolitics, wars rarely become disasters overnight. They become disasters through decisions, political, diplomatic, and strategic decisions. What could have been one of the most significant foreign policy victories for the United States may now be turning into a strategic quagmire. The question many analysts are now asking is this: how did the Trump administration turn the Iran crisis into a potential foreign policy disaster? Could this conflict have been handled differently? Could it have united Western allies against a growing Russia-Iran strategic partnership? And what might be the global political and economic consequences if this conflict continues to escalate? In this episode, we critically analyze the current Middle East crisis, the decisions that shaped it, and the possible geopolitical realignment that may follow. The starting point of this crisis can be traced to the collapse of nuclear diplomacy with Iran. The previous framework, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was originally designed to limit Iran's nuclear ambitions through inspections and verification. Instead of rebuilding or leveraging diplomatic negotiations with Iran, the administration of Donald Trump cancelled the ongoing diplomatic engagement pursued earlier under Joe Biden and adopted a far more hawkish approach. While negotiations were not progressing smoothly, they still presented a strategic opportunity. That opportunity was building a united international coalition. The United States could have called a summit of Western allies and presented a powerful argument that Iran's delay tactics were not merely diplomatic maneuvers, but part of a broader geopolitical strategy linked to the war between Russia and Ukraine. There is growing evidence that military cooperation between Russia and Iran has deepened significantly. Iran has supplied drones and other military technologies that have been used extensively in the war in Ukraine. In return, analysts suspect that Iran may be seeking Russian technological support for its own strategic ambitions. The logic behind this potential strategic partnership could be clear. Iran provides drones and military support to Russia. Russia provides nuclear technology and strategic backing to Iran. Russia gains a powerful strategic ally in the Middle East. Iran gains protection and technological advancement. In such a scenario, Iran could effectively become Russia's strategic counterpart to Israel in the Middle East. If this argument had been clearly presented, the United States might have successfully united Western allies against a growing Russia-Iran security axis. But that is not what happened. Instead of building a broad coalition, the Trump administration appeared to pursue a more unilateral military approach. The expectation seemed to be that decisive military strikes, together with support from Israel, could potentially decapitate the Iranian leadership and collapse the regime. However, history repeatedly shows that regime change through external military force rarely produces stable outcomes. Examples include the aftermath of the Iraq War and the long-term consequences of the Libyan civil war. Rather than collapsing regimes, such actions often produce prolonged instability. One of the most controversial aspects of the conflict has been the suggestion that regime change in Iran was among the strategic objectives. This may have been a major diplomatic mistake. Under international law, openly pursuing regime change is highly controversial and often considered illegitimate. For Western allies whose governments operate within strict legal frameworks, joining a war perceived as illegal becomes politically impossible. Even more importantly, history shows that external threats often strengthen authoritarian regimes. rather than weaken them. When regime survival is threatened, governments can mobilize nationalist sentiment and rally public support against what they portray as foreign aggression. In many cases, the very objective of regime change can produce the opposite result. The current difficulties may also reflect a broader strategic doctrine associated with the political movement known as Make America Great Again. This approach often combines two seemingly contradictory elements: isolationism in alliances and diplomacy, aggressive unilateral military action. In recent years, tensions have emerged between the United States and several traditional allies. Relations with Canada have experienced political and economic disagreements. There were also disputes with European allies over issues involving Greenland and broader trade tariffs. At the same time, repeated criticism of the NATO alliance and its defence spending commitments has created resentment among European governments. This history matters because alliances are built on trust, shared sacrifice, and long-term cooperation. Many NATO countries suffered casualties during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan alongside the United States. Public criticism of those contributions left a lingering political memory among Allied governments. The reluctance of several Western allies, including France, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, to become deeply involved in the current conflict, reflects this wider strategic context. The French military analyst Michel Yakovlev famously compared joining the conflict to buying cheap tickets for the Titanic after it had already hit the iceberg. He quoted US Army War College principle: "You don't reinforce failure. You move on. You find something else." His warning was essentially this: entering a war without a clear strategy or defined endgame may be politically and militarily reckless. Another fascinating dimension of the crisis involves the role of Ukraine. Iranian-made Shahed drones have been widely used by Russia in the war against Ukraine. As a result, Ukraine has developed significant expertise in detecting, intercepting, and neutralizing these systems. Reports suggest that behind closed doors, the United States may have explored Ukrainian assistance in countering these drones in the Middle East conflict, even while publicly downplaying such cooperation. If Ukraine were to assist successfully, it could potentially receive several strategic benefits: financial support, energy assistance in oil and gas, expanded intelligence sharing, diplomatic backing from Western allies, logistics, and military cooperation. In other words, the Middle East crisis could indirectly influence the trajectory of the war in Ukraine. The long-term consequences of this conflict could extend far beyond the Middle East. We may see major geopolitical realignments in several areas. 1. Middle East power balance. Regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran may adjust their alliances and security strategies. 2. Global political realignment. The growing cooperation between Russia and Iran could strengthen an alternative geopolitical bloc, challenging Western influence. 3. Economic consequences. Conflicts in the Middle East always affect global energy markets and international trade routes. Disruptions near strategic corridors, such as the Strait of Hormuz, could have significant effects on global oil prices and economic stability. The current Middle East crisis is more than just another regional conflict. It represents a complex intersection of diplomacy, military strategy, global alliances, and geopolitical competition. What could have been a diplomatic opportunity to unite Western allies against a growing Russia-Iran strategic partnership may instead be evolving into a strategic quagmire. Whether the United States ultimately emerges stronger or weaker from this conflict will depend on how the next phase unfolds. Because in international politics, the true consequences of war are often determined not by how wars begin, but by how they end. If you found this analysis helpful, subscribe to our UNWS TV 2024 for more in-depth discussions on global politics, security, and international affairs. Like, comment and share, and ring that bell for future episodes. Because understanding geopolitics is not just about following the headlines. It is about understanding the forces shaping the world we live in. Thank you for watching. I am Titus Efi, EU News 2024.